With my 35 years of experience, our team at US Asset Management can deliver professional investment management, financial planning to help you target your goals, and even specialized divorce financial analysis if you need it. We are here to help you make better decisions with your money. Call US Asset Management today and let's get to work in your financial future.
The left is siding with illegals, attacking ICE, and fighting to let non-citizens vote. Republican Kelvin King is a graduate of the Air Force Academy, Air Force veteran, and conservative businessman. As Georgia's Secretary of State, Kelvin will put Americans first, root out corruption, clean up voter rolls, and restore confidence in our elections. The other candidates had their chance and failed. Republican Kelvin King for Secretary of State, leadership Georgia voters can trust.
Pro-Trump warrior Steve Gooch won't just cut property taxes in Georgia. He'll throw them straight in the wood chipper.
Senior citizens on fixed income shouldn't be forced from their homes. Neither should veterans who have served our country and fought for our freedoms. And neither should anyone else for that matter. Frankly, these crazy property taxes are un-American. I'll tear them to shreds. We'll make home ownership great again.
Steve Gooch for Lieutenant Governor. Toughest tax cutter Georgia's ever seen.
Do you already have your investments with Fidelity? I'm David Cross with US Asset Management. Did you know that you can assign your investment management to my team and put my 35 years of experience to work for you? You simply assign us as your investment manager and you keep the same username and password. Professional management, and you get to work with someone who shares your values. Call US Asset Management today and put us to work for you.
What happens in Georgia gets revealed one by one as the facts are unsealed. From the pit comes what they don't want you to see. When the daily nugget of truth is dropped with your host, BKP.
And we're back. Yes, we are back. I'm your host, BKP, and you're watching BKP Politics on voiceofruralamerica.com. How are you today? Hope you're doing well. And yes, we are back. So before we get started today, I just want to, with this quick, make sure I have the right one, little quick disclaimer here to make sure everybody's clear. This podcast, we do sell advertising on the podcast. Our marketing department does sell advertising on the podcast. Candidates are welcome to purchase an ad. But at no time has your host, very clear, at no time has your host, have I been paid by any political campaign. No one or an individual has paid me for a narrative on this program, or to support a candidate, or to do a story, or to not do a story. It hasn't happened here. You can trust that. Okay? Want to be clear right up front. Yes, we sell advertising like everyone else. You can go to the TV channels. Obviously, you can see advertising all day long politically, and but you can always trust that this show, no one has purchased what you're about to hear. Now, here is what I'm working on. I've had several requests for different races. We have, if you go to our Substack, you can, if you go to our Substack channel, you can look at all of the articles we've done. We've done a breakdown of the Secretary of State's race. We did a breakdown of the U.S. Senate race. Won't be the last time. But today we're going to break down the Georgia Lieutenant Governor's race. Now, there's not been a lot of talk about the Lieutenant Governor's race. Not a lot of talk about it. Obviously, in Georgia right now, not even the U.S. Senate race, but the Georgia Governor's race has sucked most of the oxygen out of the room to where we can't get into other races. So before we start on the lieutenant governor's race, let me say this to you out there. I know many of you have chosen your candidates. You've picked your candidates for several different reasons. Positions they have you agree with, things that they've done in the past, votes, or their voting record, whatever it may be. Some of you may feel they're moderate, and that's what you like. Some may feel they're to the right, and they're strong to the right, and that's what you want. So if you've picked your candidate today in the lieutenant governor's race, nothing we do here is to offend you. This is just for research purposes and to make you think about several things going on or possibilities out there that are taking place. Because the lieutenant governor's race is very important. And so we're going to break that down today. Now, you know, when I look at all of the races, there's some things I really, I wait at times to talk about certain races to see what develops. And we don't like it here when personal things develop in a race. We don't like it here when personal attacks show up in certain races. And it's inevitable, they always come. We don't like it here when rumors on social media and different platforms out there are circulating unsubstantiated. We don't like that here. We try to make sure everything we bring to you is newsworthy, accurate, things you can look up yourself, things you can research yourself, and make your own decisions, because that's what we always want you to do. We really don't go into, hey, you vote this way. We don't do that. But, what does happen from time to time is one candidate will go after another candidate. And, we'd prefer that not happen. We'd prefer voting records. We'd prefer things of that nature that we can discuss. I had a discussion with a lieutenant governor candidate in Unadilla last Saturday night, and I said, look, there's some things that's been on my desk for quite some time. I'd prefer to say that I have some opposition to you based on a voting record or the budget or something of that nature. But, these things are out there. So, first of all, let's go over the things you don't want to hear. Now, lieutenant governor is very important. And as Republicans out there, because that's the majority of our audience, are Republicans, and we're talking about the lieutenant governor candidates for the Republican primary here in Georgia. But one thing that we have to look at is the possibility. Now, again, I'm not drawing your attention to this because I want to be negative. So in we won't call it a perfect world, but in the perfect world, we win. When I say we, Republicans win the U.S. Senate race against John Ossoff, and we send our first Republican senator back to the Senate, and then we win the governor's mansion that Brian Kemp is vacating, the governor's office in Georgia, lieutenant governor, and all the way down the ticket as we have it today, with the exception John Ossoff, the Democrat. But there's a possibility that doesn't happen. It really is. There's a lot of polling data. There's a lot of mood out there. There's been so many jungle primaries, different races in Georgia, from the PSC races to some of the Senate races and special elections, that are leading the pundits and the people that are analyzing the races in Georgia to feel that Democrats have their opportunity. No, you didn't like to hear that, but we have to approach it that way. All right? And I've told you this. Democrats are salivating. Okay? That's why very unpopular Secretary of State article with some people, but we are looking at here, all right? Same thing with the U.S. Senate race. We are looking at who can win in November. Now, obviously, I can't make that decision, but as voters out there, Republican voters, we have to put candidates on the ticket that are most likely to be able to be elected in Georgia. Because in Georgia, one political lane is not enough to elect our candidate. And as I've said many times, I feel the Republican Party has about 3 political lanes. And if we don't come together and then, whether you like it or not, Republicans, and then appeal to a percentage of independents, we can't win an election in Georgia. So my number one focus is who could do the job, who could appeal to most of the voters, get the job done, do a good job, but then also who can win in November, but possibly, here's what you don't want to look at, serve as lieutenant governor, Republican, under a Democrat governor. Yes, that could happen. So before we start, let me just show you here. Sabato's crystal ball from the University of Virginia. In mid-March 2026, this prominent nonpartisan newsletter officially moved the Georgia gubernatorial race from leans Republican to toss-up. They explicitly cited Georgia as the clearest Democrat pickup opportunity in the country. The National Journal, the Hotline, the gubernatorial power rankings, recently named Georgia as the best chance for Democrats to flip a Republican-held governor's seat in 2026. The BGR Group, their February 2026 outlook noted that while Republicans have held the office since 2022, the lack of incumbent makes it one of the most competitive battleground states for the 2026 election. So, before we start into the lieutenant governors, I just want to lay the groundwork. You know, our goal is to elect a Republican governor. But what if a Democrat becomes governor? And what if the next one down, maybe a Republican, becomes lieutenant governor and has to work with a Democrat? Who can we trust the most in every scenario? Which Republican can we trust with a new Republican governor? Or which Republican can we trust to stand up and push back against a Democrat governor? Everything's on the table. So let's look at the responsibilities of our lieutenant governor in Georgia. And let's just do that so it lays the groundwork of some of the things we're going to talk about with the candidates. And we're only going to talk about the 4 top candidates that are most likely to be one of your nominees today. Some are going to say, well, there's other candidates out there that you're not discussing or given an opportunity. Sometimes I just don't take our time going into the 1.5% candidate or the 2% candidate that is on the ballot. Now, President of the Senate. So the lieutenant governor is the president of the Senate. This is the most visible and hands-on part of the job under the Georgia Constitution. The lieutenant governor serves as the presiding officer over the state Senate. Now, being that, all right, one other thing before we get into our four candidates, if we have an outsider that stepped up, now what I call a real outsider that stepped up and is running for lieutenant governor, okay, we would look at it that way. But we have one House member since David Clark has been a member of the Georgia State House since 2015. Is it 10 years now? And we have we have one Georgia State House member running, and 3, John Kennedy resigned. We'll talk about that in a minute. One former and 2 current Georgia State senators running. So every candidate we have has been around a lobbyist somewhere at some time, and we could come up with different things and have pushback on every candidate we put up here today. Presiding over the Senate. Number 1, Lieutenant Governor presides over the Senate. Presiding over debate. They sit on the rostrum, right? Is that what it's called? The high desk at the front of the chamber. Moderate the debate, recognize senators to speak, and maintain the order. We have seen that many a times. They're a tie-breaking vote. The only time the lieutenant governor votes is in the case of a tie. Committee assignments. This where it gets very, very tense, because this is where committee assignments come in, and we're going to talk about that later. The next lieutenant governor will assign who's in charge of what committees, all right? So if you want to ask any of these candidates any questions, you may want to ask them, instead of, excuse me, way off the wall questions, well, let's leave it at that I hear, a serious question like committee assignments. How do you plan to appoint those? What will be the criteria? Are you just going to appoint all your friends? This is very important because they decide the committees. Now, when a lieutenant governor decides a committee assignment and who chairs those committees, that's when the bills that are picked get sent into those committees, and then the lieutenant governor has power over to say to a committee chair, get this bill out and let's get it on the floor. Very, very powerful in moving legislation, all right? One of the most powerful soft powers of the office is the role of committee on assignments. While the Senate rules have changed over the years to shift some of the power to the president pro tem, the lieutenant governor still plays a massive role in determining which senators sit on which committees and who chairs them. This effectively gives them the power to reward allies and sideline rivals. Now, why has there been recent changes in this rule in the office? Because of a prior lieutenant governor that came from the House of Representatives, served in the House of Representatives, ran for lieutenant governor, Jeff Duncan. Remember, after 2020, when he stripped people of their committee assignments to punish them, don't forget, there were some changes made. So this has the power to reward allies, has the power to sideline allies. Right? Now, so you want to be cautious in picking your lieutenant governor candidate and who may be the kind of person that, only picks people that are friendly to them or has vengeance for someone. That's just the way it is, truthful, okay? Now, the other thing that's very important before we get into these candidates, they're a successor to the governor, if anything was to happen, right? The office was created in 1945. The primary reason for the office was created in 1945 to ensure a clear line of succession. So if, God forbid, something happens to the governor, for any reason whatsoever, the governor cannot serve, the lieutenant governor would elevate and would serve out the remainder of the term. Undergoing surgery, anything like that, the lieutenant governor exercises the power of the governor, becoming governor. If the governor dies, resigns, or is removed from office, the lieutenant governor then succeeds the governor. Very important. Now, this is the one for all of our good friends out there that follow every piece of legislation, or you're looking for the next lieutenant governor that will listen to you. Okay, because another thing, while we're talking about lieutenant governors, which ones are going to shut the door? Which ones have campaigned as though they're going to be open to us, talk to us, work with us, but the day they're elected, we feel they'll shut the door and not communicate any longer with us and not care how we feel, right? Legislative influence. That's the lieutenant governor on the Senate. While they cannot formally author a bill, they have significant influence over state laws. The bully pulpit, because they are the statewide elected official, the lieutenant governor can use his platform to champion specific issues like tax reform, education, public safety, and pressure the legislature to act on them. The gatekeeper, by deciding which committees, a bill is assigned to, they can effectively kill a bill by sending it to committee where they know it will never see a vote or grease the wheels for a bill they support. The enormous amount of power in this office to put bills on the floor. So if you were watching our program and our podcast during the legislative session, many times I would tell you the power to put something on the floor is at the discretion over on the Senate side of your lieutenant governor. Now, not on the House of Representatives sides. That is your Speaker of the House, which they have to have a relationship. Lieutenant governor has to have a relationship. Like it or not, regardless of who is in the Speaker's chamber, has to be some kind of relationship. And who is in the governor's office, there needs to be some sort of relationship. So before we get into our candidates here, all right, keep in mind the power here. Now, I've often told you that during the last legislative session, if they want to put it on the floor, they can. If they want to tell the committee, move this bill, they can. Get it out of committee, they can. That's right. Now, so one more little housekeeping note on the lieutenant governor's office. Executive duties. The governor can assign specific executive tasks or oversight responsibilities to the lieutenant governor. This often includes serving on various state boards, commissions, and authorities. All right. Limitations, unlike the governor, they don't have veto power. They cannot author legislation, and they have no term limits. So sometimes we look to the lieutenant governor to be able to do more than that office actually has the ability to do. But the power there is enormous. Now, there was a time, and we won't go won't go back into that, but it has not been recently. There was a time when there was a weekly, I don't know if I'm accurate, but I think there was a weekly breakfast in the governor's office where the speaker and the lieutenant governor would come in and just talk and have coffee and whatever, some Danish, I'll pick Danish, I don't know why. Cinnamon rolls, I don't know why. But that being said, there was a communication. But remember, we opened up, what if the lieutenant governor has to work with the governor? Now, and the governor's not a Republican. So, let's start here. This is our first candidate, John F. Kennedy. Now, I am a no on this candidate. I am a no that he cannot get elected in November. I'm going to give you some reasons that I don't think John F. Kennedy is a good candidate, can't get elected in November, and some of the things that I am very disappointed with this candidate. All right. Now, John F. Kennedy first of all, he was the senator from the 18th district. All right. He's running for lieutenant governor. And one of the negatives I really have with him is his resignation details the Georgia state senator from the 18th district, John F. Kennedy, resigned from his seat on December 9th, 2025. Now, respectfully, Greg Dolezal, Steve Gooch, and David Clark in the House did not resign their seats. They served their term, meaning they did not cost their district, and the three of them will give them all a plus on that. The three of them did not cost their district a jungle primary, a special election to fill their seat while they were campaigning and raising campaign cash. They have completed their term. I think that's honorable, okay? So no matter what the outcome is in the lieutenant governor's race, David Clark, Steve Gooch, and Greg Dolezal should be appreciated for finishing the term that the people in their district elected them to. But not John Kennedy. I'm very upset with this because the districts do not budget in their yearly budget for these special elections. And they cost an enormous amount of money to do. And it puts it, and the taxpayers in the counties that they represent have to pay for the special election. That's number one. Number two, if he resigned December 9th, basically the district really did not have a state senator truly representing them for a full term this year. So not only did the people of his district have to pay for a special election, all right, that's outside of their budget, they really did not have full representation in their Senate district because they had to have a special election. By the time it got done and they got their senator sworn in, and then there's no time for the senator to go through orientation, and they're just in there voting. Everything about this to me was wrong and selfish, period. That also being said, he resigned because you cannot raise money for your campaign while you're in session. So he wanted to be able to go raise money. So John F. Kennedy, that's number one. I mean, I can make it very clear. All right. The next thing that concerns me, if he's in the lieutenant governor's office, all right, if he's in the lieutenant governor's office, Democrats this past year put a lot of bills out that you may not be aware of. And when you file a bill, it's good for 2 years. A bill is good for 2 years. So the bills that the Democrats filed last year will be available this upcoming session in 2027. Yes, 2027. In January 2027, the Democrats' bills will be available. All right? Now, that being said, there's a lot of bills filed. And we're hoping that we're working with a Republican. We hope we're working with a Republican governor. All right? But if we lose this ground, who's in the lieutenant governor's office, and just how much negotiating will they do for our rights, and what kind of bills will they accept, and what kind of bills will they put into committee? Because keep in mind, in 2019, Republicans controlled the Senate, but even Republicans controlling the Senate, what would John Kennedy allow to go into committee? And the reason I say this has several names to it. We'll come back to it. On March 4th, 2019, Senate Bill 150 passed out of the Georgia State Judiciary Committee. Now, this is one example. So we would do an 8-hour podcast if we went through and found examples, pro and con, of every candidate. But this one just gives me the feeling, what rights would he negotiate away? What would he negotiate with Democrats and put on the floor for vote? The Senate Judiciary Committee, on a unanimous vote, remember, Republicans had control. They didn't have to vote on this. They didn't even have to have it in the committee. All right? But keep in mind, in 2019, who let this go? This is very important to put all this together, because there's a lot to think about here today, because we're up against it. Who's the lieutenant governor? Jeff Duncan. 2019. Who put this into committee? Jeff Duncan. Allowed it into the Senate Judiciary Committee. So what would he do, John F. Kennedy? This means that all 7 Republicans, keep in mind, members of the committee at the time, Senators Jess Jones. Now, the interesting thing about this, we'll talk about on a later date, 2 of our attorney generals in Georgia that are candidates, 2 of our candidates for attorney general, voted this out of committee. That should have never seen the light of day. Bill Cowsard, our lieutenant governor candidate, Blake Tillery, Bill Heath, John Kennedy, William Ligon, and Brian Strickland. Now keep in mind, out of 7 of these, 4 are candidates for office today. 2 are candidates for Attorney General, and 2 are candidates for Lieutenant Governor, Blake Tillery and John Kennedy. Voted yes to advance the legislation alongside the 3 Democrat members. The unanimous bipartisan approval of gun restrictions measure, authored by Democrat Senator Jen Jones. So, we have a Democrat senator that authored this gun restriction bill, 2019. Stay with me. At that time, a lieutenant governor that was elected as a former House member, remember that, over into the Senate, because House members that go into the Senate as lieutenant governor do not have the relationship to steer the Senate. One more time. If you're a House member and you go over as lieutenant governor into the Senate, you don't have the relationship power to steer the Senate. That's not a negative. That's how it works. That's why we do this. Now, in 2019, Jeff Duncan allows a bill authored by Jen Jordan, a Democrat senator, to go in to a Republican-controlled Georgia Senate Judiciary Committee on gun restrictions, and 4 of our candidates today voted to move it out of committee. Pause on that for just a minute. The bipartisan approval of the gun restriction measure authored by Democrat Senator Jen Jordan by a Republican-controlled committee was highly unusual. It was exactly this unanimous yes vote that sparked such intense, immediate backlash from Second Amendment advocacy groups across Georgia who felt the Republican committee members had betrayed their conservative platform. While the bill quickly stalled out later in the legislative process and never became a law, it successfully cleared a committee full of Republican support. Now, just a real brief here. Okay. Yes, indirectly through his organization. This bill was lobbied for and financed, okay, by none other than Michael Bloomberg. While Michael Bloomberg did not personally draft or sponsor the bill in the Georgia legislature, that was done by Democrat Senator Jen Jordan, okay, the bill was heavily backed and promoted by Everytown for Gun Safety, the massive gun control advocacy group that Bloomberg co-founded and primarily funded. All right. Here is how the backing worked in practice, the lobbying push. Everytown for Gun Safety, along with its grassroots wing, Moms Demand Action, made passing SB 150 one of the absolute top legislative priorities in Georgia during the 2019 session. Now, again, what's upsetting about this gun restriction bill is 4 of our candidates on the ballot today, and 2 of them wanting to be lieutenant governor, voted yes to move this bill out of committee. Republicans. So that's my second reason that John Kennedy is just an absolute no for me. Absolute no. And I tell you this, the reason I say that is I'm going to move on to our next candidate is John Kennedy was when he was a freshman senator, he was the floor leader for Governor Nathan Deal. Now, let me just say something. In Georgia politics, all right, if you're elected in immediately as a freshman and you're pulled into the governor's office as a floor leader, you are being groomed. Okay, you are being groomed from day one to move their legislation. Regardless, this is generally how it works. Once you become a floor leader, it's pretty hard for you to go back into the governor and say, I know I'm pushing your bill on the floor, or I'm pushing this bill because you want me to support it, but back home my constituents don't want it. So in all seriousness, once a floor leader comes into place, for the most part, back home can get ignored. So John Kennedy was a freshman floor leader for Governor Nathan Deal. He was always groomed to not completely listen to his constituents back home. Bottom line, they will tell you, don't take it from me, call them in the district. Do all this research yourself. Now, that being said, with everything out there, I feel the Republican base, because when it comes time for election, the Republican base is going to have to find a candidate that independents are going to vote for, Republicans in Buckhead and Republicans in Brookhaven, whether you like it or not, are going to vote for. And Republicans in the 14th, 9th, 2nd, 1st, 3rd are going to vote for all around the state and bring in independence. Have no choice. But I feel that things like knowing that John Kennedy worked with a Jeff Duncan in a committee and voted out a gun restriction bill, there'll be enough pushback from the base that he can't get elected in November. I just really feel that. I feel if he's on the ballot, we got a problem. I'm just saying. Okay? Now, that being said, I might get some argument. Now, let's go to Blake Tillery. Now, Blake Tillery, that's our next candidate. And Blake Tillery is the state senator from the 19th. And this one troubles me for a couple reasons, and I'll tell you why. I think he's a pretty nice guy. Okay? Oh, backing up before I get into Blake Tillery, let's back up, put this in the John Kennedy. I've not seen him campaigning. I mean, in North Georgia, I do know, I think I saw something on Facebook where he was in Rabun County one night, but all over the state, like Unadilla Saturday, or he wasn't in Hall County Saturday. I think when I looked at pictures of, correct me if I'm wrong out there in Hall County, but I think when I looked at pictures over in Hall County at their meet and greet and their forum they held, the lieutenant governors, I was pretty sure David Clark was there, Blake Tillery was there, and Steve Gooch was there, and Jeff Dolezal was there. I didn't see a John Kennedy. So we have not seen him out campaigning. I think John Kennedy is running more of like a Chamber of Commerce kind of campaign, business community campaign, that kind of campaign, and he's not really campaigned with the base. Just saying. Now, let's get to Blake Tillery. Blake Tillery, he's a nice guy. He really is. I met Blake Tillery in Fannin County. I met Blake Tillery in Gilmer County. All right. I've had 2 or 3 very good conversations with Blake Tillery. I spoke with Blake Tillery concerning this segment that was coming up this past Saturday at Unadilla at the event down there. He's a nice guy. I've never met him yet that he hasn't asked for my vote. And he knows all the candidates out there. And he says, look, if I'm not, here's what I've really liked about Blake Tillery. He says, if I'm not your first choice, can you make me your second? Meaning probably there'll be a runoff. So, and I've enjoyed the conversations I've had with him. Now, that being said, this is where it gets tough because there's something that took place not just in his personal life. He was a commissioner at the time. I'm sorry, maybe we can fact check that when we write our article. In the county, I'm pretty sure he was a commissioner in the county and was serving at that time, not the Georgia State Senate. But he had something very tragic take place in his life. He is responsible for the death of an individual. We'll put it that way. Now, this is where this comes in. And we'll get to that momentarily. As I've said on this program multiple times, there's things that come to this desk that never see the light of day, not due to the fact that I keep it from you. It's never that, I promise you that. Because I can always look at the camera and look you straight in the eye. I don't keep it from you. But it comes to this desk and it comes in and I can't validate it. And sometimes I get phone calls. What is someone trying to get me to believe? And guess what? Here's a here's a breaking story for you. Politics is dirty. All right. It's nasty. It's ugly. Here's another thing. People will lie surrounding politics. So I don't know, all jokes aside, I don't know when one person has called another person and said, hey, you know BKP, call him, feed him this, see if he'll take it. So I'm always on guard, and the desk is stacked full of things all the time. And I filter through them. And I will only bring them when they are news or may affect the office they are seeking, and you, the voters, should know about it. And that being said, what I'm about to go into where Mr. Tillery is concerned, I want you to know you should go do all your own research. But because another candidate did this, it's now a part of the campaign. And I'll get to this right here. I'm going to play a video. Now, David Clark is a candidate for lieutenant governor. And he recently put out this video. And I'm going to play it for you now.
Blake Tillery, but a more fitting name for him is Blake Killery. He should be in prison right now, not running for lieutenant governor of Georgia. And I have the proof. On April 11th, 2016, at approximately 7:30 in the morning on Highway 292 in Vidalia, Blake Killery ran over a man on a bicycle. That man was Mr. Takaya, a husband and a father with kids who was just trying to get to work at Walmart. Killery hit him from behind. He initially refused to hand over his phone, but the records prove he sent 2 text messages at the exact time of the crash. The Georgia State Patrol investigator concluded that Killery failed to maintain his lane and failed to give the 3-foot safe distance, resulting in the death of Mr. Takaya. The investigator recommended felony vehicular homicide because of the evidence and because Killery lied about texting and driving during the accident. But the local DA refused to prosecute. Let me remind you, felony vehicular manslaughter, when you cooperate, is 5 to 10 years. Lied to the investigating officer, it jumps 8 to 15 years behind bars. Blake Killery got 0. Mark Takaya's family never got justice because Killery was an elected official with powerful connections. One set of rules for the powerful and another set for everyday Georgians. That's wrong every day of the week and twice on Sunday. That's exactly why I'm running for lieutenant governor. Too many of my opponents aren't who they say they are. We need real fighters who will hold the powerful accountable. Blake Killery needs to trade that campaign bus for a prison cell. Mr. Takaya's family still deserves justice. And to every cyclist out there, especially around Vidalia, Georgia, be safe because the powerful don't always play by the rules. I'm running for lieutenant governor to end the 2-tiered system of justice in Georgia. Your voice matters.
Now we haven't gotten to David Clark yet, but now keep in mind before we do that he is a member of the Georgia State House. Okay, David Clark. We'll get there in a minute. These are things that this is how it works. If you don't like it, this is how it works. Remember, David Clark is a member of the Georgia State House. Regardless of what, that may be your candidate. I do not dislike David Clark, but if he was lieutenant governor, if he was to be elected lieutenant governor, okay, out of the state house, what he did coming out and doing that against Blake Tillery, he would not have a working relationship with the Senate. He wouldn't. I'm just saying, you're probably looking and say, well, that's not right. I mean, he told us something we needed to know. Okay, if that's how you feel. But I'm going to tell you right now, he's in the Georgia State House. He's not an outsider. He's not an outsider. He's a 10-year representative in the State House. If he goes to lieutenant governor And I'm not saying he would ever do anything of the Jeff Duncan, but remember, Jeff Duncan was a state representative. So if David Clark went to the state house, from the state house to the to the Georgia State Senate, I find it hard to believe he'd have a working relationship to accomplish things. Just putting it out there, how it works. Now, Blake Tillery. Now, right here, I have had the police report, and the reason I'm telling you this, now, this guy, the Georgia Independent, now on the text messages, there's debate on whether his phone, there was two incoming or outgoing. So keep this in mind very clear. We're not trying this case on this program. And the only reason you're hearing about it is because David Clark did this and the news picked it up. And it's out there. I have had the same police report when David Clark says this is evidence. If you're upset with me and you say, why didn't you tell us? Well, I've had the same police report on the desk here for 3 months. Now, there's a guy that runs in the local area down there in Blake Tillery's area. He runs a website called the Georgia Independent. He is the one that put this up and calls Blake Tillery Blake Killery. Here is some of the things you would find on his website. Now, another reason we're showing you this, and I told Blake Tillery this Saturday, all right? You see, here is One News, fatal 2016 accident resurfaces in Georgia Lieutenant Governor's race. And here's another one, all right? Fatal 2016 accident resurfaces in Georgia Lieutenant Governor's race. Bicyclist Mark Takada. And this is Mr. Takada right here. This is Mr. Takada. He was killed that morning, and Blake Tillery's car did hit him. But it made the news. So the only reason you're hearing it here today, no matter if you're upset with me and you say, oh, you were going to keep this from us? No. And it's not because I think Blake Tillery is a nice guy. I think he's a nice guy. I really do. And I'm going to give you the real reasons why I think he's a no for lieutenant governor. All right? Now, could he possibly win in November? I'm going to put him into the maybe. John Kennedy, no. Tillery, maybe. I feel like I'm the Cook Political Report. Maybe leaning to likely not. That's the way I'm going to do it. But because this turned into news and David Clark did what he did. Now, David Clark, when he did this, he really just showed me that what would he do? What would he do? What would he do to his colleagues? You see, Blake Tillery's not a colleague to him because David Clark's a House member. Got to think it out, all right? So it's Blake Tillery. Now, let me give you the reasons that I feel Mr. Tillery and I have discussed this with him. So let me go back here to number 8. So let's go back to my one issue that's strong with Mr. Tillery. Remember March 4th, 2019, SB 150. So Mr. Tillery, if he's lieutenant governor, right? What would he put into the committee? What would he approve to send to the committee? Who would be his, leaders, and who would get the committee assignments? But remember, March 4th, 2019, SB 150 that passed, Blake Tillery is one of the Republican committee members. All right? And it says here, voted yes to advance the bill with 3 Democrats. So Blake Tillery sat on a committee, a majority of Republicans, with Senator Jen Jones, the Democrat, authored a gun restriction bill. A gun restriction bill, your Second Amendment, and he voted yes to move it out of committee. And while the bill quickly stalled later in the legislative process and never became law, it successfully cleared a committee with full Republican support. And don't forget, this is a Michael Bloomberg bill. So that's one reason that I am a no with Blake Tillery. Now, the second reason is last year I said to you in December, if you go back to my Rumble channel, I said to you last December, I said, folks, we are about to go into the biggest political stunt of legislation this session. The 2026 legislative session is going to be one big political stunt. Watch for it. And I asked lawmakers on this program, I asked lawmakers personally, if you're running for office, please do not involve yourself in political stunts. Now, Blake Tillery said that he wanted to end state income tax, okay? And by himself, he could not do that, obviously. And then he campaigned and he started saying he wanted to push back against corporate tax breaks. If we would end corporate tax breaks, we could bring in enough money, and he wanted to start slashing these corporate giveaways and tax breaks. But the bill, SB 476, pushed for sunsets. So in 2026, he authored legislation, SB 476, that aimed to sunset all state income tax credits by 2032 to offset personal income tax cuts. So when he first started running, he was out there, you know what, we're going to cut your personal income tax. There's no reason we can't get it done, and here's how we're going to do it. But actually, the bill put a sunset clause. It's 2026 to move it out to 2032 to offset personal income tax, to get rid of state income tax credits for corporations. And we both know that anything that gets pushed out into other legislative sessions, especially after he would be out of office if lieutenant governor or later in his term, it's going to get altered. So I didn't like that. That was a political stunt to me. And I want to be fair to Mr. Tillery. Although he is not responsible for the Georgia state budget, he has chaired the Georgia State Senate Appropriations Committee overseeing the budget. So Blake Tillery has chaired the Appropriations Committee for 6 years in the Georgia State Senate. I have had a problem with the Georgia state budget for years because I'm a fiscal conservative, and I do not totally put this on Blake Tillery, but if you will look, in 2019, our state budget was 26.2. In 2026, it was 37.8, but then we did a amended budget. Remember, this year we did in 2026, and we moved it from 37.8 up to 43.6 billion, so everybody can have a little more money to give away during the campaign season, right? And to give away during the campaign season. And then we have a new budget out there that is not signed yet for 2027. I think it's HB 974 for $38.5 billion. Keep this in mind, since 2019, we've gone up. We will be over $10 billion, the budget's increased. Now, what these candidates and what people will tell you as the rate of growth and factoring in inflation, this is actually a conservative number. I quite, to the contrary, don't believe it's a conservative number, but we'll leave it there. So, with that being said, that kind of, ends my reasons for Blake Tillery. But if he gets on the ballot somehow, some way, I think there's a possibility. I mean, the only thing I could give him is maybe lean, most likely not. That's where I'm at. Now, let's go to David Clark, and I'll make this brief, all right? There's a couple things with David Clark. First and foremost, David Clark is the, I think, District 100. Is it District 100? He's a House rep. And he's in the Georgia State House, number one. I think he's been there for 10 years. And first of all, what he did to Blake Tillery, running with that, that's okay. That's fine. I mean, I could find other reasons why I should be lieutenant governor and Blake Tillery should not. And he does get out there and he does campaign and he has his reasons. But one of the, when I say strikes, and first of all, we want to say thank you because he served in Afghanistan, Army Ranger, right? Green Beret. Really want to say thank you for the service. It's not a bad guy, but again, House member, and you see what he did attacking Blake Tillery. So we'll call that strike one, because I know I'm going to get the biggest pushback on this. What's it matter? He's not an outsider. And I have to tell you, Lieutenant Governor, it's not that it has to be. I know you're looking at me like, well, BKB, it has to be a senator. No, it could be an outsider. But I'm telling you right now, one, this individual would have to cooperate with all the state senators out there, and being a House member, strike one. Now, here is, and I forgot some things on Blake Tillery I'm going to go back to, because we're going to get into elections. David Clark, the next lieutenant governor with the governor, will be making decisions on our next election system. And David Clark voted yes. This is SB 214, all right? And you can go look this up and you go down the left side. But David Clark voted yes on this horrific bill that would extend the QR codes. David Clark voted yes to extend the QR codes, right? He voted yes on this horrific bill that would end up putting an electronic voting system in place, that we've been trying to get rid of electronic voting for how long? So everything about this bill is not down the lane of election integrity. It's just not, and he voted yes for it. While at the same time, he did this, and you know, he said, remember this when you vote, right? Republicans had a real plan to end the homestead property tax through a constitutional amendment that needed 2/3 vote to pass relief homeowners. Now, they knew in the House when they put this up, they didn't have the votes. They knew they didn't have the Democrat votes. But he's actually pretty clear on what they wanted to do. Remember this when you vote. We tried to do something about property tax that required a constitutional amendment. So he's basically saying we set this up for an election piece. But at the same time, remember when it came to SB 214 and what we could do about our elections and whether the QR code is illegal, David Clark voted yes. Now, just going to make this a quick, brief, and I know I'm going to hear it's not relevant, but go back to what the lieutenant governor does. And go back that the next lieutenant governor, ready? Just for who can we trust in that office? Because remember, when 2020 happened, now wait a minute, just stay with me. When 2020 happened, we didn't have a lieutenant governor a lieutenant governor that would work with us. Our lieutenant governor came from the House. Our lieutenant governor was Jeff Duncan, and our lieutenant governor did not side with anything our Senate wanted to do, Georgia State Senate. Because although I don't think anyone is conservative compared to BKP here, seriously, I don't. So governor's office, House of Representatives over in Georgia, or the Georgia State Senate, I don't find them all, any of them really to be conservative bodies. But that being said, our Georgia State Senate is the conservative body in Georgia. It is. The state Senate, our Georgia State Senate, has been our conservative body. Now, if you don't have time to go look at every piece of legislation and break it down and find out what they stopped, but as a body, our Georgia State Senate has done a pretty good job of fighting back some really ludicrous, out of left field legislation from the House. Now, keep this in mind, the lieutenant governor that goes in the office would be the lieutenant governor when? In 2028, during our presidential cycle. You see, we want the next presidential cycle, Trump won't be on the ballot. And we want a Republican governor and we want a Republican lieutenant governor. And if God forbid we get a Democrat governor, we want a Republican lieutenant governor. And we want a Republican lieutenant governor that will stand up for us. Keep this in mind. All right? We're going to have these offices filled during the presidential 2028 election cycle. So who do you want? Do you want a member of the House? David Clark? Because we're staying on David Clark here. Because remember, the last House member, and this is not saying this would happen. Remember, Jeff Duncan, right, the lieutenant governor of Georgia, at the time objected to the premise of hearings and a broader effort to overturn the 2020 election, right? And remember, Ligon, then Senator Ligon, because the Election Law Study Subcommittee was legally organized under the Parent Judicial Committee, Chairman William Liggett had the procedural authority to hold the meetings. Remember that? Jeff Duncan did not want them. However, Jeff Duncan entirely opposed what was happening in those rooms. All right? Now, During that election, remember this, Jeff Duncan came, don't forget, he came to the lieutenant governor's office out of the Georgia State House. Jeff Duncan was a staunch defender of the integrity of the 2020 election results, not you and I. He publicly and repeatedly condemned the misinformation that was being presented in the December 2020 committee hearings, all right? And remember what he did. He rejected the Senate demands. Rejecting the committee's demands. Following the hearings, Senator Liggins and several other Republican senators who attended the committee, including Burt Jones, drafted petitions and pushed for a special session for the Georgia General Assembly to override the election results and select alternative electors. Right? Duncan flatly rejected this alongside Governor Brian Kemp. Don't forget that. Now, what's that got to do with David Clark? That he comes from the House? It could be lieutenant governor? This guy has the possibility of being the governor on the Democrat side. Slim, but has a possibility. I'm just going to tell you, as a House member, I think as a House member, and what David Clark has done, I think he's an absolute no. I think what he's done, he would never see the light of day in a general election. I don't think he can get elected. And keep in mind, in 2020, the consequences. William Liggin was already retiring. He faced no discipline, but Senate Duncan, right? Duncan used his power as lieutenant governor to penalize other senators who those committee hearings and aggressively pushed stop the steal narrative. When the new legislative session began in January 2021, Duncan effectively stripped several key Republicans who had participated in the hearings and pushed for a special session. Remember, Duncan penalized them. So I am no on David Clark. David Clark comes from the House, okay? Comes from the House. He's not a newcomer. He's not an outsider. Your Georgia state senators, BKP, that's the good old boy system. You don't want to break it up. No, I didn't say that. I'm just saying, folks, we got to go into 2028 presidential cycle, all right? Your state senators around the state after this election are going to be set. Most of them are already set. Most of them. I'm going to tell you right now, your state senators not going to be rushing in to say, hey, David Clark, Lieutenant Governor David Clark. And the last thing we need is the possibility of a Democrat governor, a lieutenant governor that comes out of the House, and our Georgia state senators. We have to figure out how to get along in the next legislative session. It's going to be very important. I'm glad there's pushback, but you understand what I'm saying. I hope I'm coming through. Now, before I get to a fan favorite, I want to go back. Remember, go back to Blake Tillery. And I forgot this right here because I'm going to play two videos of why I think he will have a lot of problems with the base. Now, this is where Blake Tillery, I said earlier, I'm going candidate by candidate. I'm going to back up and go back into Blake Tillery for a minute. The base, with his voting on that gun legislation, restriction legislation, at one time in committee, plus his comments concerning elections. I'm going to play this for you right here before we get to our next candidate.
Mr. Carl.
Paper ballots.
Yeah. The status, there was a Senate bill that passed that allows it under an emergency rule. It's passed, it came through the Senate, it was introduced in the Senate after crossover day. I'll be honest with you, I don't know if it passed the Senate or not yet. I do expect that you will see a provision that allows paper ballots in the May election. There's some things that relate to federal law that I don't quite have the best grasp of as to when you can change certain things, but I know that I expect that.
Sir,
Question two.
as Lieutenant Governor, you would be in office when the new election system would be voted on, appropriating funds and picking the next election system in Georgia. So tell us, as Lieutenant Governor, what election system would you put forth? Which one do you support in the next cycle?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ones that are out there, right? If people want to move to paper ballots, that doesn't bother me. I'll tell you what my concern right now with the current system is. A lot of people are concerned, and for those of you who don't know who asked the question, his name's Brian Pritchett. Brian asked the question. My concern is that we're not going to be done paying off this system when it expires. So why would you put yourself in a position from a cost perspective? Remember, I'm pretty fiscally conservative. Why would you want to put yourself in a cost position when you were the same equivalent would be paying for a car after the car's miles had already run out? I just don't think that's a wise thing to do. Well,
all right. So I will say this, based on those comments right there, he doesn't want to even, it's not in his wheelhouse discussing the next election system for voters. So I don't think the base is going to get on board with Blake Tillery. I really don't think they are. I think that's a problem. You could tell that's not a warm, fuzzy conversation he wants to have. You have to have the conversation. You're going to be Lieutenant Governor if elected, and you're going to be responsible for the next, election system. But he doesn't want to even talk about it until we're done paying for the last one. Well, okay. Now, so I guess it's time for Greg Dolezal, right? Let's get to Greg Dolezal. Now, Greg is another one of those candidates. He is a state senator. He's cordial. I talked to Greg. I've talked to Greg a couple times. One time on this program back last year, I made some comments about something, and he called me up, and he vehemently denied it. And he said, it's not accurate what you're saying. And I said, okay, or what you're even implying. I said, okay, I won't say it again. And he, and I didn't. I didn't. I mean, we had a great conversation, and until some things develop, I said, okay, I won't say that anymore. But Greg is one of those guys that there's so much stuff laying on the desk, and there's so many phone calls, and there's this and that, but I can't substantiate, I can't substantiate, and B, I don't know that they're appropriate and have to be discussed in the race for lieutenant governor. All right. So I've never brought them to the forefront. Now, keep in mind, our main discussion that we've been having with all of our races is who can get elected in 2026. Now, in the lieutenant governor's race, our top 4 candidates, they've all been in the Georgia State Senate for some time or the Georgia State House for some time. They have bumped elbows with lobbyists. We'll say that in the lightest way. They have been involved in legislation, every single one of them, that you and I don't like. They have not put forth legislation that you and I, and this goes for all four that you and I have asked to have happen. So what we're looking at is what we can say is the candidate that can work within the Senate, can get things done, work with the new governor, or stand up to the old governor. Not the old governor. Stand up, not to the old governor. Back. Erase that. That governor will be gone. But stand up to a governor if, God forbid, it's a Democrat. And the door will be open in the office to you and I, and we can communicate. So now, Jeff Dolezal, I'm going to be very clear and I'm going to be very firm. We're talking about who can be elected in 2026. Jeff Dolezal cannot get elected in 2026. He cannot. So if you're out there, because I know some of you, I've actually had phone calls with some of you saying, are you sure that's what you want to do with your vote? All right? Because throwing the vote away or whatever the case may be is one thing, but Jeff Dolezal can't get elected. Now, let's get to this, because I had things laying on my desk, and I'm going to give you, I told you last year, don't fall for political stunts. Number one, if he's lieutenant governor of Georgia, one, you and I are not getting in the office. If you think, well, I have Greg Dolezal's ear, or I'll talk to Greg, or Greg talks to me, I don't see that happening, all right? I don't see that happening. Second, he pulled so many political stunts this past year. And he has run so far to the right. Now, that's okay. That's okay. Because we have multiple lanes. Greg is running, in my opinion, Greg is running the, I'm going to get on the ballot and then I'll worry about it campaign. I'll worry about the campaign. Because I'm going to look you in the eye and tell you something. The way Greg Dolezal has run his campaign, all right, if he becomes our nominee for the Republican Party, the very day he becomes the nominee, he has to start shifting to gain independent support, moderate support, all the above. Now, he may argue with this when this video comes out that that's not true. But as I told you all along, in all the races we're covering, we have about 3 lanes in the Republican Party. And in November, we're going to have to get the lane over here, this one right here, and that little left-leaning lane in the Republican Party we don't like to talk about over here. Then we're going to have to grab some independents so we can win. And we're going to have voter turnout. But that being said, Greg put a paper ballot bill on the floor on crossover. We've done the segment. It died. All right? It was a political stunt. And here it is, SB 568. So I'll hear people all the time, Greg tried everything to get paper ballots. Greg's been in there a long time. And then Greg went for all the low-hanging, emotional moments of some of my dearest friends. And it angered me in a lot of ways. It's past time that lawmakers push for state to take over Fulton County elections. So Greg has gone after everything under the sun as far to the right as he can go. All right? He has. He's gone on every far right. Now, I am to the right. I'm conservative. So I'm not saying the issues, many of the issues that Greg talks about, that I don't share, right? The same view. I can't say that. I'd be wrong. But the reality of why he did it, who he really is, what he really believes in probably, and what he's really trying to do is get you to vote for him so he can become lieutenant governor. I get it. Everything he's done, he knows that he wasn't getting Fonnie Willis removed from the DA's office. He knows that. But he has enough TV coverage to say he led the charge. He knows that he was not going to remove the Fulton County Board of Elections. But he got enough people whipped up into a frenzy that he was leading the charge and calling it out. He knows that all the people that we say are registered to vote at these mailboxes and these mailbox places, I won't name the names, thousands of them to one address. He knows that we know that. But what he did all legislative session is go after anything that whooped people up into an emotional frenzy and put fear in some people. And I don't know what his quote is, but in his campaign, I think he closes that he's trying to save America by saving Georgia or something. Now, okay, that's fine. But in Fulton County, as you know, we've got Ron Pitts there, the Fulton County chairman. Now, today, we're not going to go into any of Greg Dolezal's business relationships with any Democrats. We're not going to go into any of his business or any of those type of things, right? But remember, our focus is on 2026 and who can win. Now, there he is, thumbs up, with Ron Pitts, chairman of the Fulton County Commission, right? Now, then he goes full Sharia law. Now, you and I both know that we're not on board with Sharia law. We're not. And we have concerns. We do in Georgia. We have concerns that there's areas that are close to being the next Dearborn, Michigan. Or we have areas that we're concerned that are going to be the next, Minnesota. We get it. And there's some of this that is very concerning to us. But Greg he's throwing Hail Mary passes, and he has an ad watch. State Senator Greg Dolezal, a Republican candidate for lieutenant governor, is facing criticism for posting a video depicting Muslims terrorizing white Georgia residents. Now, he's done this twice. He did another one recently, and he put out ads. And then he says here, London has fallen. London has fallen. Europe is under siege. In America, the invaders who would rather pillage our generosity than assimilate are roaming Minnesota, New York, and LA. As lieutenant governor, I will fight the enemy before they are within the gates and keep Georgia safe and Sharia free. Okay. But I'm telling you right now, these are Hail Mary passes that he's trying to put the right lane of the Republicans in Georgia. He's trying to put this little box area to get on the ballot. So let me just say this. All right, so before anyone looks at me and starts the attacks, well, Greg is a true conservative, and Greg's a true fighter, and Greg is the only one that's had the guts. I actually heard that Greg has had, excuse me out there, but this was the quote, Greg has had the balls to talk about things that no one else will talk about. Well, I will tell you this. I've asked candidates not to pull political stunts. Seriously. Don't try to seek, ask, or scare me into my vote and do it in an emotional way. I want serious candidates on the issues, and plus in this very trying 2026 with odds stacking up and pushing back against Republicans, we have to have caution on how we proceed. So no, BKP is not here, be very clear, advocating Sharia law. BKP has been on the election integrity fight since November of 2020. and you know it. But all these stunts are piling up, and now my concern is, can he win in 2026? No. Democrats are waiting for Greg. And let me show you, because I received a website video. I think maybe before the legislative session started, January. I mean, we're February, March, April, May. We're in May. No, we're in April. We're in April, right? January, February, March, April. I've had this video for 4 months. Now, when I first got this video, I sat on it because I have all these political stunts and my reasons why I don't think Greg could win the lieutenant governor's office, and I don't like political stunts. But that being said, all right, I don't venture into personal stuff. I don't. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I have been on the other side of that. And it's just not right. And people have families. And I'm not implying anything. I'm really not. But people have families, people have children. I mean, I stay clear away from that. It's just not right. But when Greg jumped into the Sharia law, whether you like it or not, this lady, who happens to be Muslim, happens to be a member of the State House, right? Is she a member? Roa Roman? Is that her name? Roa Roman? And the reason we're doing this now is not because I brought it up. Is because what Greg did, he walked into it. And these are messages to Greg. And let me say this, I'm going to be very candid. These are messages to Greg, and this is my clear opinion of what the message is. You know, when you unwrap a newspaper and there's a fish? You ever watch any of the movies? You know, there's a fish. Was it Lou Brodsky sleeps with the fishes? Was it Lou Brodsky that sleeps with the fishes? Just saying, right? So I'm going to tell you, they're sending, this is my opinion, clearly my opinion. What you're about to see is they're sending messages to Greg Dolezal saying, we know something, maybe, implying that, or we can't wait for you to be the nominee for lieutenant governor. Because guess what? We are waiting. Now, this is what I'm thinking. Because after the commercial, the first one he put up, one of the state's few Muslim legislators sought out Republican candidate for lieutenant governor this week as he continued to face criticism for posting a campaign video depicting Muslim characters terrorizing Georgia members. So this is Roa Roman, State Representative Roa Roman from Duluth, a Duluth Democrat. What is she doing? Well, on the Senate floor, she gave him a special delivery. She gave him a little bag, gave Greg a little bag, and inside the little bag was a set of bunny ears. This is true, a set of bunny ears. And the AJC, because see, I got this on the desk. I got it on the desk. I'm not doing anything with it. But they made it news. In this bag, a set of costume bunny ears. But why? But why? Question mark, the AJC says. The gift was a nod to GregBunnyEars.com website run by an unknown entity displaying the text, Dearest Greg Dolezal, the truth will set you free, more to come. We're not really sure what it's about, but it doesn't seem like it's anything good, Roman said. Okay, now, let me play that for you. All right, let me play that for you. So I'm going to play it. We're going to run it twice because it takes a second, so listen close.
Greg, I know you're not a furry, but I appreciate your generosity. Sharing is caring. Greg, I know you're not a furry, but I appreciate your generosity. Sharing is caring.
So some say Greg Dolezal is an attention hound, but he's very good at sitting in the corner and watching quietly. All right? So then, this is what happened here. Let me get these back up. Roa goes and puts this out. Roa Roman, right? Dolezal Lieutenant Governor on one of his signs. She posts that. So what's the big deal, right? And I did this. This is AI generated. After this all broke, this is me. I did this AI generated. So the website's been laying on my desk. I still don't know what it is. I don't play it. I never play it. I never comment on it. But the AJC put the address up. People are talking about it. Then Greg Dolezal with one of the committees, which we don't like Fonnie Willis here. We think Fonnie Willis should have been removed from office. But we're going to get into that in a minute. All right? There's the battle cries, remove Fonnie Willis. Then there's the reality of how does that work, okay? So we'll get into that in just a moment. But there was a special committee assignment to investigate for Greg Dolezal and a committee to investigate Fonnie Willis and Wade, her boyfriend. So Fonnie Willis comes in and Greg is the chair. And Fonnie Willis with her attorney, Roy Barnes, just let Greg Dolezal have it. But this is what happened afterwards. Right? So this is the website, right? Dearest Greg Dolezal, the truth shall set you free. Now, so next, Fonnie Willis, the DA of Fulton County, she comes in, and this is what takes place. Ready?
Again, thank y'all for letting me be here today.
Time I was in this building, some of y'all might know a little bit about that. It was not for a celebration like today. I was here to testify before what I can only describe to you as, and I hope they listening, a clown show. Yes. And as clown shows go, it was led by a clown. I understand the same clown that led my questioning was just gifted bunny ears. Some of y'all know the significance of that. Some of y'all don't. But he was gifted these bunny ears by Representative Rua Romanian. She was responding to a hateful, racist video that he had recently posted. She told him she gave him the bunny ears because she understood he was into that type of thing. Word on the street is, allegedly, he got some strange furry habits. The Senate hearing was a great waste of taxpayers' money and time. The Senate hearing was not about getting
Now, I don't dislike Greg Dolezal. I'm serious. I don't. And some of you may think, well, but let me just say this, all right? Strange furry habits. Now, I know this audience, you don't like anything about Roa Roman. Okay. And you don't like anything about Fonnie Willis. But I tell you what, this is the Fonnie Willis, like her or not, that found a special grand jury and seated them and indicted these people and costed millions and millions of dollars in legal fees to our side and President Trump. It's the same Fonnie Willis that did not give up. That she may have gotten removed from the case. But you know what she has? She's still in that Fulton County DA's office. And she still has access to investigators. So, in my opinion, what they were doing, both of them were doing, in my opinion, is they were actually saying, we're waiting. Yeah, we are waiting, Greg. Yeah, we're waiting because if for some reason you become the nominee because you've pulled all these stunts, we can't wait. So I say Greg Dolezal's an absolute no. I know I'm going to get... I do these regardless. I always say, hey, welcome to the uglies. Yeah, you know the uglies out there that attack me. But Greg Dolezal on the lieutenant governor ticket going into November could be very much enough to drag the ticket all the way down. I mean, there's things out here. We're not clear. There's things out here, and all these political stunts that he has participated in, that it's very possible Democrats, they're salivating. Democrats are salivating. I showed you at the beginning of the show, they think they're going to flip the Democrats are going to flip the governor's seat. They think they're going to hold on by about 5% to the Senate seat with John Ossoff. And they think that's going to have coattails to where actually we have one of the only two Supreme Court justice races that Democrats think they're going to pull that out. Yes. There's campaign. They are Supreme Court justices. I forget the second one, but I know the first one, and I forget his name, but there's two Republican that were appointed by Republican governor, two Republicans. All right, Charlie, no, what is Charlie's last name? I forget his name, but anyhow, but two Democrats, Jen Jordan and another Democrat, are running against these two, and they're six-figure media buys in that race. Unheard of. So, Democrats salivating to take us down. A Greg Dolezal on the ticket, why, that would just really make their day. What if 3 weeks before early voting going into November, we find out more about the bunny ears and what it's all about? Who put that website out? Why did the AJC report it? Why are they doing this? Just saying. They're salivating. They want to take us down. Don't forget that. Greg Dolezal is an absolute no going into November. Now, in our last candidate today, okay, in the respect to be transparent, this is Steve Gooch. Now, the respect to be transparent, this is my Georgia State Senator, okay? Don't want any confusion. This is my Georgia State Senator, Steve Gooch. I have had a relationship with my Georgia State Senator. Many of you have out there with yours. I know him all the way back. He was sole commissioner of Lumpkin County, Georgia. First Republican elected in Lumpkin County, sole commissioner there, then went on to become a state senator. He is a business owner in Lumpkin County. There's pushback on his business from time to time. He gets heat. Yes, I get it. But that is what I want to be just perfectly clear. This is transparent. This is my Georgia State Senator. I'm going to get the messages that the uglies are going to put up that I'm biased on this race. You're going to hear that. But I've analyzed every one of these candidates, and I'm going to look you right in the eye. If any candidate out there I feel can get through the negatives, stand up to the Democrats, be a lieutenant governor that possibly may have to push back on a Democrat governor, a lieutenant governor that can work within our state Senate, keep it the conservative side that we have right now, and maybe even, turn it up 2 notches. If there's a candidate out there, I will name that candidate to you regardless of who they are to me. Period. My promise. Now, Steve Gooch, I have the strongest feeling he can win in November. And I'm going to tell you why. Because he didn't go in the last year in any political stunts. And I asked all candidates not to do it. And I asked him, don't do it. He did not participate in last legislative session's political stunts. He did not. He did not put himself in a position where he's out there having to defend something that he knew would never pass. And there's often times that I have pressured him myself, and you out there know it, and you have pressured him, and you may have heard the same thing I've heard. I'm not going to come out just so people can think, I can make something happen just because they want to hear it and tell people something that can't be done. It's not going to happen with me. I've had those discussions with him. All right? Now, moving right along. He's been the Georgia State Senator. And then this year, because you cannot have a leadership position and run for a state office. So this year, he was not the majority leader. All right? He was not the majority leader, Republican majority leader in the state Senate. But last year he was. And I'm going to give you one bill, and I'm going to give you the example for a reason. Because I remember what happened when everybody wanted Fani Willis to be removed from office. I remember what happened. And people wanted a special session. So people wanted a special session and wanted Fani Willis removed from office. And I'm using this one for an example. And I hear special session all the time, and I agree with that. But the only one that has the power in the state of Georgia to call a special session is the governor. And there's a mechanism for the Senate and the House to come together to call one. But the governor is the only one that could just call it. So the governor has the sole authority to call a special session by proclamation. In this case, 0 senators are required to initiate it through the governor's usually consults with legislative leaders before doing so. But the governor doesn't have to ask anybody. So when you wanted a special session in 2020, the governor is the only one that had the power. When you wanted a special session and to remove Fani Willis, the governor is the only one that had that power just to do it. Now, if the legislative petition to call the special session to override the governor is 3/5, a supermajority. The threshold, if the governor does not call a session, the General Assembly can force one themselves. This requires a written petition certifying that an emergency exists in affairs of the state. The threshold, the petition must be signed by 3/5 of the members of each house. The number of senators, since there are 56, it requires 34. The same is required of the House. All right? The requirement for the House is there's 108 members of the Georgia House of Representatives. Of 3/5 of 180 must also sign, 108 members. So, guess what? We have never had the membership strength to call a special session. And what people didn't want to see is their representatives, the Republicans, that would not vote to call one. And what Steve Gooch tried to do is prevent you or prevent a shakeup with state senators that voted no, and then all of a sudden you can't get anything done because they knew they didn't have the votes. Now, some of you might say, well, you should have exposed them. You should have put them on the record. I hear that a lot. But they never had the votes to call it. So you have to have someone that can manage through the waters. I will tell you this, he got really pushed on because he didn't step up and support a special session. And I know that, and I get it. Reining in a rogue prosecutor. Now, as the state Republican Senate Majority Leader, you have to be able to navigate through things, and you don't always get the glory for it. And you have to have someone that just doesn't always go for the headlines and go for the glory and go for a political stunt that gets things done. So reining in a rogue prosecutor, SB 92. As Majority Leader in 2023, Gooch was highly instrumental in the passage of Senate Bill 92, which created the Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Commission. This was a massive priority for Georgia Republicans aiming directly at progressive Democrat district attorneys, particularly in the Atlanta area. The law empowers the state to investigate, discipline, and even remove locally elected prosecutors who implement blanket policies refusing to prosecute certain low-level offenses or who are accused of neglecting their duties. We had prosecutors that said they would not prosecute crime. All right? Now, he did not author this legislation. I'm giving you one example. Yes, SB 92 passed. It passed. Senate Bill 92 officially passed the Georgia General Assembly during the 2023 legislative session and was signed into law by Governor Kemp on May 5th, 2023. Here's a quick overview of what happened with the bill and its aftermath. So we're talking about a bill that went to the floor on the Senate, worked its way over to the House, and got to the governor's desk for signature. Because what a lot of people do is they're out there with political stunts campaigning, right? And they say, I authored this piece of legislation. I carried this piece of legislation. So I've only picked out one. And I will tell you this. You can go through and you can find the legislation that you don't agree with that this candidate was involved in. I get it. I've heard that from many people. But I have 4 candidates right now that I'm looking at, and I'm trying to look at the one that can win in November. What the bill did, championed by conservative leaders, including Steve Gooch, SB 92 created the Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Committee. All right. This oversight board was granted the authority to investigate discipline. Remember that, right? And a part of removing. Now, State Senator Gooch's primary role in getting SB 92 passed was deeply tied to his power as the Senate Republican Majority Leader. While he was not the primary author of the bill, that was Randy Roberts, Gooch was the floor general who ensured it made it across the finish line. Because the bill was highly controversial and opposed by Democrats, it required strict party unity to pass. Now, the point I'm bringing this up is other people out there that are running for office, and if we have good legislation, can those candidates, if they become lieutenant governor, do they know how to pull all the Republicans together to get some good legislation passed? This is not magic. They don't wave a wand and pass it. Lieutenant governor doesn't have those kind of powers. They have to be able to be a general on the floor or know how to pull everything together. David Clark can't do that. That's my opinion. Greg Dolezal has upset so many of his colleagues. I'm just telling you right now, and God knows if he got in that office. And Blake Tillery, well, we leave him to most likely not. But would he try? Maybe. So, while he was not the primary author, Gooch was the general who ensured, because it was opposed by Democrats and required strict party unity to pass. Here's exactly how Gooch played a role in passage and implementation of SB 92, whipping votes and floor management. As Majority Leader, Gooch's primary job is to ensure that the Republican caucus stays united on major legislative priorities during the 2023 session. The creation of the Prosecuting Attorney Qualifications Commission was arguably the top criminal justice priority of Georgia Republicans. Gooch used his leadership position to rally the GOP caucus, shut down Democrat delay tactics, and ensure the bill had the necessary votes to pass strictly along party lines in the Senate. So I'm not looking for the establishment, I promise you. But knowing how the sausage is made, just saying, and what is out there and what we have to go through and how to stop all the Democrat tactics, as we have seen, framing the messaging. To get the bill passed, leadership had to sell it to the public. Gooch was one of the loudest voices framing SB 92 as a matter of public safety. He argued that the state needed a mechanism to step in when locally elected district attorneys, specifically progressive DAs in an area like Athens and Atlanta, implemented blanket policies refusing to prosecute low-level crime. Now, this made it to the House, all right? This made it to the House, and it made it to the House. It made it to Governor Governor Kemp signed it. Now, the next year it was challenged in the court, and they had to make some adjustments on it. But this is how it got done. All right? Now, I'm going to show you one more thing here, and we'll get out for the day. Using SB 92 to quell internal Republican infighting. You see, Majority Leader Steve Gooch knew all along any calls for a special session for Fani Willis's removal was not going to happen. And it wasn't. Not everybody looks you in the eye and just tells you that. And the governor was not going to do it, and Republicans were not going to vote for it. But he wanted to make sure that he brought Republicans and the infighting back in line. Using SB 92 to quell internal Republican infighting, Gooch's most notable strategic use of SB 92 actually happened after it passed, when Fulton County DA Fani Willis indicted Donald Trump in 2023. Following the indictment, a fraction of the hard-right Republican, demanded a special legislative session to immediately impeach Willis. Gooch and other Republican leaders knew the impeachment session would fail, as it required Democrat votes and would create a massive political circus. It just would have. I supported it. I wanted Fani Willis removed. I wanted her impeached. I wanted to take her budget. I agree 100%. But all that being said, someone had to have some clear balance to say, to do that, we're going to need Democrat votes. And you really think that's going to happen, right? And if we failed to do that and we tried to political stunt, it's going to cause and create massive political circus. To shut down the infighting, Gooch pointed directly to SB 92. He publicly urged the Republican base to calm down, urging that a special session was unnecessary because the legislation had just passed SB 92. He championed the new Oversight Commission as a mature, legal sound tool in the toolbox that conservatives could use to investigate prosecutors successfully, using the law to keep his caucus from fracturing. Now, that's big, and it's bigger than you may think. That's the only way we're going to be able to get legislation passed, is by level-head, common sense, conservative Republican that knows there's no use of having a media circus. There's no use of going on every TV channel and yelling, impeach somebody when it's not going to happen. Now, this bill went on. They challenged it in court. They had to go the next year and make some alterations because some things in this was so strict that the courts knocked it down. Now, that being said, Senate Bill 92 passed the Georgia State Senate on March 2nd, 2023 with a final vote of 32 to 24. The vote was split entirely along party lines. Every Republican present voted yes to create the Prosecuting Oversight Commission. Now, I don't know if the yes votes, all 33 Republicans, it says that, means all of them voted yes on this bill. But it was powered through on the floor by the majority leader, Steve Gooch. Now, the only reason I brought that one up, and there's going to be some people say, well, there's three other candidates, and you had this negative and that negative, and you know there's a piece of legislation out there right now that Steve Gooch signed on to that is a bad piece of legislation. Or he voted yes and we pushed him to vote no. That's correct. It is correct. Absolutely correct. I will not argue with that. Every one of these legislators. But I'm telling you right now, I'm focused on who can win in 2026. That's my focus. And I know this. When he was the majority leader, we had SB 189. And you call the election integrity people that were involved with SB 189. And you know what? It's not him. It was not him that did not do something about the QR code. But SB 189 passed. And I remember when SB 189 was in committee, and we did not think it was going to get to the floor for a vote on the final day of the Georgia legislature. We did not think it was going to get to the floor for a vote. And I remember how many people were texting Gooch. I call him Gooch. Steve Gooch, the senator. Dolezal, sorry. Tillery, we get used to that, so not to disrespect any of these people in their positions. But how many of us were texting him, this language has to come out. This language is bad. That night, he worked all the way up to midnight or right up to the end of the legislative session or whatever time it was at night to get the language correct on SB 189 with Georgia integrity. Now, there's others out there claiming they did this, claiming they were working on Georgia election integrity here and election integrity here. SB 189 made it through to the governor's desk and Brian Kemp signed it. Right? Signed it. SB 189 made it through to the governor's desk. The majority leader championed it all the way through, and it got there, and it was signed by the governor, SB 189. SB 92, it was moved through the floor, and it got to the governor's desk, and it was signed. Now, some of you will say, well, there's a lot of bills that get through, and they're signed by the governor. This is true. But how to do that? Now, the last but not least, the most accessible to you and I will be Steve Gooch. I can tell you hands down. He will be the most accessible to you and I. That's right, as Lieutenant Governor. We can go through legislation, and he will pay attention to you and I or be accessible to you and I. That's number one. Number two, he will hold his ground on Democrats because he knows Democrat tactics. The guy knows the Democrat tactics. He knows what Democrats try to pull. He knows fast ones. And he will hold his ground for you and I, and he won't compromise our gun rights away. He won't compromise our Second Amendment rights away, our freedom of speech rights away. He will not compromise those away as a Republican lieutenant governor if for some reason there's a Democrat in the governor's office. He won't do it. Knows the Democrat tactics, and I really feel we can get some good Republican, good conservative legislation done. Now, I'm going to end where I started. All the candidates, they're politicians. All of them. Every one. Not a one of them that are not. Greg Dolezal's a politician in the state Senate. Blake Tillery's a politician in the state Senate. Steve Gooch, politician in the state Senate. All right. And David Clark, politician in the state Senate. All four. No one's exempt of having legislation that you and I disagree with. All four. All right? But when it comes to the four candidates, and you start looking at who put a stop to bad legislation and who was able to get things done with some good legislation in the office, and that's Steve Gooch. Bottom line. Now, the other thing that concerns me in this race And keep in mind, the only thing we're talking about today is who can win in 2026. That's it. Who can win in November? Right? Who is not going to drag the party down? Do I think it's possible news outlets, if Blake Tillery is the nominee? And I don't dislike any of these guys. I mean, they're cordial to me. They're nice. I'm not trying to start a fight with them, and I'm not trying to start a fight with you. I'm really not. If this is your candidate, it's your candidate. I just don't want to lose in November. And will the Democrats salivating this year take Blake Tillery's, what took place years ago and go after him in certain different ways? David Clark, right? And Greg Dolezal. Will they go after them? Will Dolezal be able to make it and not pull the ticket down? You see, another thing we have to have is if we have a governor candidate and we have a governor candidate and we have a U.S. Senate candidate, we have to start eliminating all these things that's going to pull the ticket down. Because Democrats are going to go, Democrats are going to probably go straight ticket. We've got to get those independents. Let me show you one other thing. This is the last thing I want to show you before we leave tonight. This concerns me because I don't know, and I'll use the word target. You see, the October surprise, the Georgia Senate wants to make sexual harassment settlements involving state lawmakers public just in time for the 2026 midterms. Why? On crossover day, the Senate amended a bill about mugshots and police body footage to make these statements public. It would supply a claim. It would apply to a claim of sexual harassment, discriminatory harassment, discrimination, or retaliation. The bill also contains the crucial sentence, this subsection shall apply retroactively. Say that 3 times fast. This subsection shall apply retroactively, meaning they can go back. There's a couple candidates. The Senate passed the bill unanimously. The House, meantime, overwhelmingly voted to shelf similar proposal. Let's be better than they are, said State Senator Randy Robinson. Back in 2018, there was, this is the Epstein rule, as they're calling it. The Epstein law. Who does it apply to? Open records. All right, folks. As I always say, right? Let's see. We're going to take a brief break. Is that what we say here? We say we're going to take a brief break. And don't forget, you can follow us on Rumble, Facebook, X. And that's Voice of Rural America. And then you can go to our Vora, Substack, Vora at BKP Politics. So, like I always say, we're going to take a brief break. We'll be back. Send me messages. Tell me what you think. Every single candidate here. Do not hesitate to scrutinize anything I say here. If these are your candidates, they're your candidates. We're just breaking this down because remember, our number one goal is what? Who do we think can win in November? that's who we have to put on the ballot. Let's take a brief break.
With my 35 years of experience, our team at U.S. Asset Management can deliver professional investment management, financial planning to help you target your goals, and even specialized divorce financial analysis if you need it. We are here to help you make better decisions with your money. Call U.S. Asset Management today, and let's get to work in your financial future.
The left is siding with illegals, attacking ICE, and fighting to let non-citizens vote. Republican Kelvin King is a graduate of the Air Force Academy, Air Force veteran, and conservative businessman. As Georgia's Secretary of State, Kelvin will put Americans first, root out corruption, clean up voter rolls, and restore confidence in our elections. The other candidates had their chance and failed. Republican Kelvin King for Secretary of State, leadership Georgia voters can trust.
Pro-Trump warrior Steve Gooch won't just cut property taxes in Georgia. He'll throw them straight in the wood chipper.
Senior citizens on fixed income shouldn't be forced from their homes. Neither should veterans who have served our country and fought for our freedoms. And neither should anyone else for that matter. Frankly, these crazy property taxes are un-American. I'll tear them to shreds. We'll make home ownership great again.
Steve Gooch for Lieutenant Governor, toughest tax cutter Georgia's ever seen.
Do you already have your investments with Fidelity? I'm David Cross with U.S. Asset Management. Did you know that you can assign your investment management to my team and put my 35 years of experience to work for you? You simply assign us as your investment manager and you keep the same username and password. Professional management, and you get to work with someone who shares your values. Call U.S. Asset Management today and put us to work for you.